Alright, this is the any percent portion of my submission. This category isn't my primary choice for what I want to run in GDQ this year if this game gets accepted, but I figured I'd still submit it in case they liked it last time and wanted to have it again. So the run's changed a lot, even since it was performed in GDQ. A lot of small tricks have been added that make the game a lot more difficult, but it's changed dramatically since the last time I made a submission video, so for those of you watching on YouTube now, hopefully you're entertained by how much this game's improved since then. The beginning of the run, well, the first minute or so is still pretty much the same. It's optimized, and then all we have to do is just deactivate the hand here. By standing out of bounds and provoking the hand to come and grab us, we can activate this taxi sequence. So now, the trigger for the taxi is over the taxi booth, and we can do this again to be dragged over it to leave the area while the hand is out. And in leaving an area in this game while the hand is out, it prevents it from coming back. It just disables the hand. That's the idea behind the glitch. So now that the hand's disabled, we can go out of bounds. And you'll see for a trick coming up why that's important. You'll notice that when I hit these robots and tikis, I earn these small currency points. These are shiny objects. And this game is thought to be a collectathon by many people who play it casually because of the lot of collecting we do of shiny objects in this game. But as a speedrun, it isn't really much of a collectathon. It's a lot more fast-paced because there are too many skips to really say that we do much collecting, consider we skip a lot of it. So what I just did there was a spatula warp abuse trick. We jumped out of bounds to get that spatula that we wouldn't normally be able to get by doing it that way. So by grabbing the spatula, drowning, I can pause the game and warp to a spatula that I just grabbed without receiving the mission. So then we can just teleport to where the mission would usually be given. By doing that, we skipped like half the level. And now we're going to do hammer skip. This is one of the newer tricks that were not in the submission I last posted for this game. Alright, so I missed the frame perfect jump to get over the ledge, but we can still get the death warp, that's fine. That's just AI manipulation with a little bit of RNG involved, depending on where the NPC fish stands. It can actually block the hammer bot's path. But we just use that to skip the tutorial part of this level. So we're just running right through the game. And you can actually look in my PB comparison cam how the run's changed since it's been in GDQ, because in that, it's kind of small, but you can see that those are the strats that I used to use when I was in GDQ last. And even since, since GDQ it's still changed quite a bit, but since I submitted it, it's changed a whole lot. Like the submission video that I made a while ago is very much different than what I'm submitting now. Alright, so now we need to do a death warp by triggering this cutscene to this fighting arena that we're supposed to do. But instead of actually fighting these robots and hitting these buttons like we should, we're actually just going to damage boost over it. And get this ledge grab. So we just kind of skip that whole fight. Jellyfish Fields has a lot of skips in it. A lot of damage boosting. So now we go back to Bikini Bottom to clean up some of the smaller missions in here. First mission we're going to clean up is Squidward's house, where we actually can get a sock with this new route that wasn't seen before in my previous submission. By destroying everything in his house and simultaneously jumping 9 times, we can collect the sock and do our 10th jump at the same time to get the spatula and the sock. It saves a little bit of time by doing both at once. Because for this mission, you jump 10 times to get a spatula. It's like one of the easier beginner levels, so the spatulas are pretty easy to get. Now we're just going to climb Squidward's house by abusing the weird collision boxes on it. This game has a lot of abuse of collision boxes and objects being solid that you shouldn't be able to climb. Here we're going to do a new skip that wasn't seen in GDQ, or even my PB for that matter. That's a taxi skip, and what that does is by standing over the taxi booth, we can just skip the animation that causes the spatulas to disappear and show you, okay, you can enter this level now. So it saves about a second, and if you miss it, the hand comes back as you fall out of bounds and you lose your run, but it's worth doing for that extra second this early in the game. So this is the only semi-grindy part of the run other than the boss fights. This would probably be a good time to read donations during this part, if we get donations this early in the run. Now the grinding issue that with this part of the game and a couple of other parts in the game, it does get a little like relaxed for a while in some parts, but those issues are addressed in another category that I'm submitting called early powers. That category has far less grinding, pretty much none at all, and there's more cruise boosting. It's a lot faster paced, excuse me. So that's a different taste if you want to check that out. But there really isn't too much grinding in this category. And you also have a lot of cool damage boosts that you don't see in the other categories, so they both have their ups and downs. It all depends on what you really want. So now that we're done getting these shiny objects, well, again, it isn't grinding when we have to smash those tiki stacks to hit the buttons that are under them. Because we can't break stone tikis just by hitting them. We have to use explosives to break them. So we had to do that anyway. Now we're just using platforming on objects that shouldn't be solid to jump gates that we shouldn't jump. This is just a form of AI manipulation here. I'm going to jump on top of this robot while it's taunting because I damaged myself to hop over the gate. So I activated that tiki on the side there because it's going to chain over and hit a bunch of tikis and give us a combo. When you get a large combo in this game, you get a lot of shiny objects for it by hitting multiple tikis at once. The shiny object route in this game is pretty optimized for this, at least this category. So minimal grinding compared to this game's view as a casual game where there's a lot of grinding in it. We cut a lot of that out in the speedrun. So now we're on to the Sea Needle challenge, the bungee challenge. This first one's pretty easy. But if you miss one tiki, you throw the cycle off completely and lose a lot of time due to it. The second one gets a little bit more challenging because we add thunder tikis into the mix. If you hit a thunder tiki, you break your cycle and then you lose a lot of time trying to scramble and get all the rest of the tikis when they're off cycle. So you have to be careful to go around the thunder tikis when we hit the floating tikis that are supporting them. Here's a very small instance of AI manipulation there. It's very slight and hard to tell, but I stood there for long enough for him to throw in my direction so I could jump away. So by doing it correctly, you can just go straight down here and get everything in a couple of jumps. And yeah, with the chuck manipulation, it's really hard to do that successfully when you're first learning how to do bungees, because you have to be moving forward while dodging it. So you're trying to manipulate its AI to toss in the wrong direction and still move forward so you don't miss the cycle. So now we're going to switch to Sandy. Sandy's very useful for platforming in this early in the run because she can clear large gaps with her third jump. But you'll see that later in the run, Sandy's not even useful because SpongeBob gets a tech exploit that can clear very large gaps very quickly. It's funny that in the other category that I'm submitting, it's so fast-paced because of all the cruise boosting in it that Sandy isn't even useful throughout the entire run. So it's definitely a different taste. That's why I decided to submit both this year. So now we have to collect these wheels. I should have mentioned that before, that these wheels are used to be exchanged for a golden spatula, much like, I believe I didn't mention this either, that the socks in this game that we're collecting are also exchanged for golden spatulas. In this game, we collect 10 socks to exchange them for one golden spatula, and we need 75 golden spatulas to enter the final boss fight. And then once we do that, we're pretty much done with the game. In about an hour. Alright, so we're actually going to do a small skip here. Nothing major. There's an invisible wall blocking the spatula here. It's normally used for completing a challenge from Sandy swinging through the rooftops, but if we go under an invisible wall, we can just grab this SpongeBob, jump back down, and switch to Sandy, continue on our way. The rooftops have a lot of skips too. It's a lot of intense platforming, and it runs on a cycle as well, so the floating platforms that go up and down, if you make a mistake, they're going to be off cycle and you lose a lot of time. So And this is a pretty relaxing part of the run. Just get the chill music, just floating through the rooftops. Probably be a good time to talk about donations here. Just because of, it's mostly just movement. There isn't too much to explain. This part's pretty simple. Same concept as the AI manipulation before that we did. We just jump on a robot and use it to boost ourselves up.
Here's another one.
So this is the platform I was talking about before. If we do it correctly, we can actually land on this platform, turn around, and float. If you miss the platform, it isn't a huge deal if your time isn't that optimized. You just get a ledge grab on this building here. But Sandy's ledge grab is very slow, so we try as hard as we can to skip it. That's also a very small instance of AI manipulation, but it's very easy to manipulate Chuck's AI when you're using Sandy because you have so many jumps. And in this situation, you have a lot of time to react to it. And now we're heading on to another boss fight. Not a boss fight. Another fighting arena in this game. Much like the one that we skipped the damage boost in Jellyfish Fields, we have to actually fight through this one, though. So this is the lighthouse fight. The reason why I used a bubble helmet there was so I could turn myself around. Now, this movement in this game is pretty hard to get the hang of. But turning around without a bubble helmet on that area is pretty precise, and it doesn't actually save time when you do it that way. So we just use a bubble helmet to turn ourselves completely around. See, at one time I actually started doing it without using the bubble helmet, and I didn't save time because the lighthouse floors run on a cycle. So it's better to use a very easy strategy that doesn't lose time. It's like there's no point in making it harder if it doesn't save any time. Especially in a marathon. So now we have all the wheels and we can warp back to Mrs. Puff. And this actually isn't even the first time in the run. Excuse me, this isn't the last time in the run. Not the final time in the run. We have to collect stuff from Mrs. Puff. She appears back in Rock Bottom as well. And in the other category, Early Powers, she appears in Kelp Forest, where we have to do a challenge for her using the brand new camper skip that was recently found. Super hype. The community was looking for it for about a year until I finally found it last month, so it's really cool to see a category with a lot of hype, fast movement that's fast-paced now has that skip that we've been theorizing about for almost a year. But not in this category. This category has a lot of different tricks, but not that one. So another thing I should mention what I just did there is if you walk off of a platform, kind of like this, didn't fall far enough for you to be able to see it there. But if you walk off a platform, your position doesn't update immediately, so you appear to float while walking. That's what I did there is I jumped a little bit later. So it's kind of like I jumped in air, so I can get more jump distance. Alright, so what I did there was a frame perfect jump to get a triple jump on top of this lifeguard stand. Alright, set this up again. Alright, this is called the Sponge Glide. This is the first major sequence break in this game. In my opinion, it's the first major sequence break. You can just use it to float all the way across the beach and land here. So we skip all the way to the end of the level, and now we can do another one to activate a trigger that enters the next area of the game. So now what we're going to do from this point on is play the entire level backward. And you'll see now that the game gets pretty glitchy at this part. So we haven't even received a mission yet to clear the bumper boats. But basically what you're supposed to do is go through the sea caves, which we skip. Oh. And Mr. Krabs says, okay, I need you to destroy a ticket booth for me. And I need you to clear the bumper boats. I need you to clear the robots out of the bumper boats. But we're still SpongeBob. We haven't even switched to Patrick to get that mission yet. So we've already cleared the bumper boats. And when we go back to Mr. Krabs later to destroy the tent, you'll see what happens. Now, this is another skip too. You see these fruits here, the little freezy ice blocks? They're called freezy fruits. And Patrick can throw them into the water, and the water freezes, he can float across. That's how you're supposed to get the spatula, but we can just use the slide mechanics to jump under the pier and get it. The freezy fruit is actually not used in the speedrun, funny enough, because it's very slow. Alright, now we need to climb these flags that are solid for some reason. Not sure why they left these flags solid, but we can abuse it, so I'm cool with it. And we can just do a precise jump there to get to this bungee, grab the spatula, and warp away, so we don't have to go through the animation. Now we've warped the slip inside onto the pier. Another sequence break is we use the slide mechanics to get the spatula under the pier. So the game thinks, okay, we already received this mission as Patrick, so we warp to it and we automatically change to Patrick. Now we have to destroy the ticket booth because Mr. Krabs says, sorry, the pier is closed, you have to help me get rid of the robots. So we get rid of this robot here. We use the robot as an auto target so we can use the splash damage from the Thunder Tiki to hit the tent. And we get the spatula automatically because the bumper boats are already cleared. Patrick didn't have to do anything because it already happened before Mr. Krabs told him to do it. And now we can continue playing the entire level backward. As you see, a lot of the levels, excuse me, every level within the world in this game has a golden spatula at the end of it. So if we're entering the level from the back, the golden spatula is right here. And the game also has a mechanic where you can jump in these teleport boxes to go from the beginning to an end of the level if you open both boxes. But if you open the box at the end of the level, the game thinks, oh, okay, well, you're already at the end of the level, so you must have already opened the one at the beginning of the level, which isn't the case for us. So we just jump in the box and get warped to the beginning of the level because the developers didn't take that into perspective. Somebody who might end up glitching the game and playing from the front to back, I mean the back to the front. Who knew? Shame on them for not realizing. Alright. So now we're heading to the first boss fight in the game. Very simple AI manipulation, a lot of repetitive stuff, which is why it'd probably be a good idea to, you know, like, entertain the crowd and read off donations, stuff like that. So, what we have to do is, every boss fight in this game has vulnerable points, and the vulnerable point of this robot is its head. So we have to just do moves that damage its head. In this first phase, you have to slam on the ground, and that causes the head to pop off. Pretty easy. Now, in this next section, the scoreboard falls and the electricity is active, so now we have to use that box to hurt Robo Sandy even more. Take more of its health down. 3 is the magic number with these boss fights. Do something 3 times, you go on to the next phase. So we have to do this 3 times now. Pop its head off, and now we have to throw it into here, taking it a step further. And this is the first boss fight in the game, so it's really easy and it's just kind of grindy. But we're just trying to manipulate this robot so it walks just barely so it touches the trigger that causes it to jump off. Because usually what it would do is it would run over to the side and do the clothesline jump, where it springs off the sidelines and attacks us. But we need to do this as quickly as possible, so we manipulate it to go up to the ropes so it doesn't have anywhere to run.
Oh, nice flying,
This is probably the most optimized segment in the game. It's extremely consistent, extremely easy, and extremely fast. So we're just doing basic manipulation here. This game has a lot of memorable quotes. The spelling, the old clothesline move. Alright, and this is the final one. And we'll move on to the final SpongeBob phase after this. Go on to some more boss fights, excuse me. Go on to some more robot fights, robot arena fights in Bikini Bottom. After we finish this boss. So this has pretty much the same manipulation for the start. Except it takes a twist here. We don't stand over here for this one, we actually have to stand over here. Now we have to just bash under its head.
What an opening for a guy literally filled with openings! Oh, what
Now, I always talk to my viewers about how I love this game because the movement's very fluent and the moves just kind of lead into each other, kind of like in Mario where you can roll out into other moves and spin jump. This game has mechanics that are sort of like that, but you don't really get to see it until later in the game. Until we get that ability to do the cool movement, we have to use a lot of damage boosts and stuff along those lines. Storage exploits to skip stuff. So any percent is a very difficult category because we don't have that movement. But even with that movement, it's still very hard to play because it's frame perfect to activate it. Alright, so now we're moving on to the Tree Dome boss fight. I keep saying boss fight. The Tree Dome fighting arena. I'll call it that from now on. So we just have to destroy all the robots in a timely manner in here. Alright, we got a good spawn. Now, RNG in this game doesn't really affect much. It's only usually like, with robot spawns, it costs a couple of seconds here and there, depending on which one you get. It isn't like a huge deal if you get a bad spawn on the Tree Dome, especially for a marathon run. It'd matter if you're going for a PB if your time's very optimized, though. Alright, so now we're moving on to another exploit called Spongeball Storage. Now, this exploit is not seen in the other category I'm showing, Early Powers, because we have cruise boosting and we don't need it. But it's just another cool exploit that we can use in the category that doesn't have cruise boosting right off the bat. So, we're going to store the Spongeball by getting it, but not giving SpongeBob a chance to transform into it. During SpongeBob's crouching animation, he can't turn into the Spongeball. So we abuse that by using his crouching animation to jump all the way up onto the police station, rolling off, and we use the game's rolling mechanics to bounce and jump on top of the chum bucket. Now, we just skipped the boss fight. So that's pretty huge. We just skipped a third of the game. And now we're in the third area of the game that you would normally have to be in after defeating RoboPatrick. But the reason why we go over here early is because we can use damage boosts to get spatulas in here, so we can then afford to go to RoboPatrick with those spatulas. That's just a little small skip that we do. To not have to wall jump, we just do a little damage. Excuse me, we do a bubble bash to touch a spatula. Alright. So now we're in the third area of the game. As you can see, if you looked, the gate was still closed for RoboPatrick, so we are not supposed to be here. That's why Mr. Krabs was invisible and he just appeared out of nowhere. The game does not think that we're here right now. In terms of unlocked levels, we aren't supposed to be here. So we have another Krusty Krab arena fight. Gotta take tally of how many times I make that mistake. Gotta practice that. So one thing I have to practice is that. Alright, so Mr. Krabs is invisible again. And you'll see, so is Bubble Buddy. He's gonna appear out of nowhere. Bubble Buddy's gonna be like, oh, you have a new power, except we really don't, because that power was unlocked by defeating RoboPatrick. Much like how we defeated Robo Sandy to get the Bubble Bowl. There are actually some cool exploits of Bubble Bowl that are not used in any run in this game that I showed in my glitch exhibition if you want to check that out. Some crazy warp speed exploits with that. Alright, that was another slide boost mechanic that we did there. Just a speed storage thing where we pull down the slide to accelerate ourselves faster so we can make it and jump on the side of the block and abuse the platforms to skip a clam. Basically what we'd have to do instead is like buy a clam and pay a lot of shiny objects to get up there, but we skipped it. Alright, that was really good actually. So that was a frame perfect jump that allows us to get a spatula early instead of having to climb those blocks. So that was actually really good. That trick's pretty hard to do first try. Now we have another exploit to do, and this is actually a huge difference compared to what I did in GDQ. It's a really big routing change that's really difficult as well. Okay, we got it. So this whole sequence that I did, you might have noticed in the upper right corner, my PB cam did a completely different sequence here, but we come out of here around 10 seconds faster. And that's because we skipped the loading screen and we used a fast 1-frame damage boost to skip the old skip that we did. The old damage boost that we called Forbidden Skip. So this skips harder, but it saves a lot of time. And it skips a loading screen. So So now we're headed to the Mermalair. And usually what happens when you're doing a run of this game, if you're an experienced runner, you just think to yourself, oh, I'm so relieved to be past Dream. It's finally over, because the Dream is a really hard segment. A lot of people lose runs there. But that Dream was pretty much perfect, and it's pretty awesome I got to show that off in this run. How the strats are done. Another damage boost there. Okay, so the Mermalair lobby. It's a lot of walking. Sometimes you get lucky, like right here. You get a damage boost. Couple of damage boosts in the lobby, nothing special. This part of the game is a little bit slower because you have to complete some puzzles with Patrick. So now would probably be another good time to talk donations and chat it up with people. Except right now we have a damage boost and a bubble ball boost. Bubble ball boost into damage boost to get a sock. And bubble ball boosting happens when you bowl on a frame that gives you faster speed. Excuse me, faster speed. If you bowl on a platform that gives you that makes you faster, right? Sorry, I'm trying to focus on this. If you bowl on a platform that makes you faster, the speed stacks into the bowl, and it makes you a lot faster. Like, it stacks onto your bowling speed, onto your running speed after that. So this is the kind of the downtime part that we can read donations in these little puzzles here. Yeah, so bubble bowl boosting, that's like a very small bubble bowl boost, not like the major one that I showed off in the glitch exhibition. But all you have to know is that it boosts your bowling speed when you do it on a fast platform. I explained it pretty poorly before, my apologies. Alright, so now we're ready to go up and do another puzzle. Now, for a lot of people who played this game when they were younger, they'll probably remember they might have had a lot of trouble on this, figuring out how to get all the towers to face inward at the same time. That's the objective here, but it's actually pretty simple. If you hit all the towers once, they just stalled, spin in. And since I last submitted this game, I've found a new route for this. Well, I didn't find it. I adopted it from a task that already existed, but nobody really talked about it. So I just watched it and I said, oh, I guess why is nobody doing this? We might as well just start doing it at runs. So it's hard to tell unless you play this game. Like, oh, he hit all the towers. Just know that I hit all the towers. Because usually what people do is they hit them in order, but I hit them in a different order that's a little bit faster. This is another slide momentum exploit that I just did there. We stack our speed so we can skip to the final boss fight in this level. And now we can just leave. Because we'll be back later to do another exploit. So we skipped a whole lot by doing that. There was a whole sequence with hitting buttons and opening platforms and going through the whole chamber, but we just skipped all of it by doing the momentum exploit. Now we have the security tunnel. Again, we skip a lot here too. We can skip an entire level of just going through these blinking tiled puzzles, chambers, whatever you want to call them. But we can just use our damage boosts and platforming exploits to get all the way up here right away and just run through the entire level. So we've been hitting these buttons because collecting 4 buttons in this level gives you a golden spatula. There's always a collectible in every level except for the boss fights and SpongeBob's Dream. So we actually don't do the rolling ballroom in this run. I don't do the rolling ballroom in any of the categories I run actually because it's slow for the shorter categories. It's done in the longer categories though. Maybe I'll submit that someday if I end up running them. Now for some reason, I'm not sure why they decided to do this, but the developers made that door lead out here. But there's no door around here. I'm not sure why they chose, but you know what, it's fine. It works out. Alright, so now we're going to Sand Mountain. And right out the bat, we gotta hit the ground running so we can make this cycle for these blocks to get on top of the Shady Shoals. Shady Shoals is the retirement home in SpongeBob, so we just have to do some platforming to get up here. so we can use the block to launch us up and cause us to make this cycle without getting the ledge grab. Now we're going to do another taxi skip like the one you saw in downtown. By jumping over the taxi, we can skip the spatula animation disappearing, and we can just enter really early. Save some time. Okay, now we're going to do a sliding momentum exploit if I can do it, because it's RNG. Alright, there we go, we got it. So if we slide forward and hit as we're rolling away from the Sandman, we can hit it and slide at the same time to push ourselves during the cutscene. And by hitting the Sandman, we get a sock. Now we have to do Mrs. Puff's time challenge. This is also kind of a more chill part of the run that we could probably talk donations during. No major tricks, just like some minor jumps, some sliding. This is a very small skip, just called billboard jump. We just jump through this and clip through the billboard. Now we can clip through this hill over here. There's like some pretty small stuff. Small optimizations. Usually you get grabbed by the hand in doing that if the hand weren't disabled. But since the hand's disabled for this category, we can just jump through. Go out of bounds and jump back on the slide. So the reason why I'm hurting myself on this slide is because I want to grind shiny objects while I'm going down the slide. And notice how we paid a lot of shiny objects to get in here before. Now we're pretty much almost back to where we were before we paid the toll booth to get in here. So Sand Mountain gives us all our shiny objects back to minimize the grinding in this run. So we have to hit 2 of these buttons to open the gate now. This hit's pretty precise, but I don't think it's frame perfect. Yeah, I was talking through it, I wasn't focusing, but whatever. Guess I won't talk when I do that next time. Alright, so we got this spatula, now we can go get the spatula from Mrs. Puff. Now we just have to clean up some stuff in the ski lodge and we'll be off to the second boss fight. So all this has been leading up to is we need to get 40 spatulas. And we have to skip around the game, do as many spatulas as we can without cruise boosting. Just so we can get 40 spatulas before entering Industrial Park. And the reason why we skip the boss and go back to it is because we need to defeat it to get the cruise bubble, which is the other half of the power that we need to activate the exploit that makes us fast. So that's our mission in this run. That's the main objective, is to get the cruise boost and just go through the rest of the game. Just plow through after we get that cruise boost as quickly as possible. So the final 20 minutes of the game, they're extremely intense. A lot of crazy movement, hard tricks, spatula after spatula after spatula. What we just did there was another out of bounds trick that we can just grab the spatula without doing a bungee. Normally you have to pay shiny objects to do that in a casual run, but because we're speed running, we're skipping a lot of the grindy stuff. For a traditionally grindy game, there are a lot of exploits that we can use just to get around the grinding and just show off all the cool stuff. So now we got the socks and Patrick. We have 40 spatulas. We're ready to go into the second boss fight. But after this, stuff gets really intense. Now, this boss fight is thought to be very inconsistent by people who run the game. It technically isn't RNG, but some people say it might as well be. I think that there's a way to manipulate it consistently 100% of the time if you've done it enough times. Because as I've gotten better at the game, slowly, like ever so slowly, after thousands of attempts, like the next thousands of attempts I do, I'll be a little bit better at it until I get to the point where I've mastered it. It's just an extremely precise manipulation in the third phase of this boss fight. First phase is pretty simple. Just wait for him to stop spinning and get the bowling shot as quickly as possible. Second phase, I'll explain the second phase when we get to it, but this whole sequence with the Robo Patrick fight is another one of those moments we should probably read off donations when people give them. Now, we actually don't do any of the boss fights in the early powers category that I submitted. A lot of people who dislike this game complain that there's too much walking in the beginning part of the game, there are too many boss fights and stuff along those lines, but the early powers category that I'm submitting actually cuts out the boss fights and it also cuts out the walking, so Maybe that'd be more up to taste for somebody who doesn't understand how a lot of these tricks work with the damage boosting. Because a lot of times people who don't know how the damage boost works find it a hard time to appreciate them. But I feel that with the early powers category, it's a lot more accessible to people who have never seen the game before, which is why I wanted to try and get the game into GDQ again to show that off. But if you guys liked 80% enough, I'd be willing to do it again if you really liked it. So that's why I'm submitting this too. I want to give you guys an option if you think you want to give the game another chance to shine. So this is also kind of a new thing that I didn't do in my submission the previous time. I now stand on this block here that's spawned by grabbing this lasso swinger. And we do that to get as close as possible so we can stop his vomit cycle. Normally, if you didn't stand in front of him when he does that vomiting thing, he would go around the whole ring, and the game expects you to dodge it so you don't get hit, but we'd rather take the damage and end the cycle early if it's faster. We'd rather him stop vomiting as soon as possible so we can just get on with the game. Alright, he spawned in the back there. That's not very good. I don't think I'm going to be able to get the... Yeah, okay. So we got to do this because the blocks weren't going to spawn in time. That's alright. So we're almost done with the third hit of this phase. Just starting now. By the way, this is a technique that I started called lasso stalling. We do this to stay above the goo that's flying around. And we also spawn boxes in while we're doing it. So it's pretty useful. And we gotta do that just to make sure we don't drown in Industrial Park. That's always terrible. When you drown in Industrial Park that late into this phase, you just lose so much time. You have to redo the entire boss. Oh, well, the entire phase. Okay, now we have the part that people say is inconsistent and terrible, and it makes them hate the game when they play it. This is the Robopat Phase 3 manipulation. So if we stand in a specific spot and do a specific movement, we can control Robopatrick, but we can manipulate him to bounce off the walls and maybe land on this side of the ring. So I think it looks like we got it. Okay, close enough. But sometimes it happens if you do it incorrectly, he can land on the opposite side of the ring. And that is not good, because you'll lose a lot of time off of that. Okay. So now we stand here and do it, because he's in a different spot. Instead of being in the center, he's on the side. So we stand a little bit closer to the center, because he's on the side, he's closer to the platform. Okay. So now we do it again. This has been a pretty good manipulation so far. And a lot of the new tricks that we're doing that weren't seen in GDQ will be seen after Robopat. The late game has been optimized a lot with a brand new major exploit called reverse cruise boosting, and I'll be showing that off in this run too. It's actually really cool. It makes a lot of cycles and movement in this game possible that weren't before. Okay, rock bottom. This is where starts getting intense. All right. So now we have the cruise bubble, which means we can do cruise boosting. Now, cruise boosting is a double frame perfect trick that activates the bubble bowl and the cruise bubble on the same frame to capture the momentum of a slide against an object or a platform. Given your angle, you can get a certain speed. It's a lot to take in, but you'll understand when you see it. Okay, that's one of the harder cruise boosts in the game, and we got a really slow one off of that, so it's unfortunate, but it happens. It's very difficult. That is not one of the things I used to do back when I got this PB. So you can actually see the difference between the strats that I did in January and the strats that I do now by looking at the PB cam. So that's just a normal cruise boost that we're doing here. Cruise boosting off a character is extremely precise because usually what you want is to do it against a flat wall so you can have a better slide. But doing it off of a rounded wall is pretty precise and it takes a lot of practice to do it. I still haven't mastered it yet, but I'm trying as hard as I can because I want to improve my time by a few seconds each time I PB. Alright, so what we did there was we activated a button. We skipped the entire level pretty much. This whole thing is extremely confusing if you've never played the game before, but we got the spatula you're supposed to get at the end of the level. Okay. Character cruise boosts are not on point today, apparently. So like what I was saying before, how these moves link together to give you some smooth movement. All the moves you were doing before in the game, the slam, the bash, the spin, they all kind of link together to make cruise boosting a lot more useful, making it a much more diverse form of movement. Now, cruise boosting always pushes you forward. It just stacks onto your movement speed with the speed you got captured from the slide. So if you just stand still, like I did there, the game doesn't detect you as moving, so we can jump on top of those shy tikis without them disappearing. But we're still moving forward because the cruise boost is pushing us, but the game doesn't realize it. Okay, so now we have the new RCB Museum. This is the SpongeBob Museum done with the reverse cruise boost cycle. I did this as Sandy the last time I submitted it, but this is by far the hardest trick in the game now, since it's been added. Here's an RCB. Okay, I missed the RCB. That's fine though, we can still make the cycle that I made. The old SpongeBob Museum cycle. Basically the reason why you would do an RCB there is to skip a full cycle on these tires. So, even though we didn't get it, we still didn't lose time off of my PB. But it's still an 8-second loss because barely getting that cycle saves 8 seconds when you get it. And it's extremely precise and difficult to do. Especially since you're doing a cruise boost with a really weird angle, you can't really tell what's going on. I missed my split, I'm just going to skip it so my golds are accurate. In case I accidentally get a best segment. Okay, so now, because we got the spatula earlier from the button press, when I mentioned we skipped to the end and got the spatula you get for finishing the level. We got that, and we warped to it with the warp of use, and now we're just playing the level backward. Oh, excuse me, I warped to the wrong place. It dropped my analog input. It's fine. So now we have to warp again to abuse the spatula warping system, and we appear at the beginning of the level that we just collected the spatula from. So the Trench of Advanced Darkness also runs on a cycle too. We have to play flawlessly to make sure that we don't miss the platform cycle that rocks back and forth in the trench. So we're just abusing the game's momentum mechanics and platforming with cruise boosting to skip a lot of stuff. This part of the run is definitely a lot more visually pleasing, and in the early powers category that I submitted, it's cruise boosting for the entire run. So I'm sure that if you guys like the cruise boosting part, you should check that out. You might really enjoy it. It's a different take on the game that I think would be really cool to see in a marathon someday. So we collected all the artwork from Mrs. Puff, and now we're ready to go on to the cleanup sections. We're going to work back to a lot of the levels we went to before. It's backtracking, but it's fun backtracking. It's pretty cool stuff. So we're going to do prawn skip now. So this requires a clip out of bounds and activating an invisible trigger that causes the boss fight to end. Now I actually spoke to one of the developers who worked on this game, and he said that the guy who programmed the Robo Sandy and Robo Patrick boss fights was not the same person who programmed this fight and the other fights that you're seeing here. Were like, this is actually the first one that we skipped yet. But you'll see later we skipped the Dutchman fight and the final boss fight. Those are programmed by different people, so that's the reason why I guess that specific developer chose to add triggers to end the boss fights for some kind of a programming thing. I don't know the specifics behind why he would do it, he or she would do it, but I don't know, it's just a programming choice, I guess, to leave those in the game. Maybe debugging, I don't know. But that's the reason why we can't outright skip the Sandy and Patrick boss fights. Okay, now we're going to do an RCB kids cycle. And we have to pop the balloon kids with an RCB this time, makes it a little bit faster. Okay, this trick was not also, this is also a brand new trick that I started doing recently. Was not seen in GDQ before. That showed off reverse cruise boosting there. Really major exploit, but I'm actually the only player who uses it right now, so it isn't as known as you'd think it'd be in the SpongeBob community unless you watch my stream. But it is major, and it does allow really cool stuff like this to be possible. Okay, we got bad RNG there, so we have to wait for the kid's cycle to go around. Normally, the reason why you would do an RCB cycle is to catch the kid on an earlier cycle. So what happens is, if you actually get the good RNG cycle, the kid will be a lot farther back. So instead of having to wait, you can just go right to it and save a lot of time, because you can hit it on the reverse end instead of having to wait. which is something you can't do if you use a normal cruise boost. So now we get to destroy this robot with the cruise bubble since we have the homing. Sometimes I call it homing missile, sometimes I call it cruise bubble, but I usually just call it homing missile sometimes just to describe what it is. We just skip an entire challenge where we have to do a puzzle to get that thing. But since we have the reach of the cruise bubble now, we can hit the robot from afar now that we're backtracking and get a spatula for it. This isn't an exploit, we just kind of hit a button and get a spatula. This is like the calm before the storm, because this game gets really intense after this part, at least for me, because I do a lot of unnecessary tricks that save like a second each. Unnecessary to anybody who isn't going for like the times that I go for. So anybody else would think they're really stupid. Like this RCB here. Completely unnecessary, saves like a second, but I do it because I want to save that second. Alright. So we're just doing an out of bounds trick over here. We're just gonna run our way over and skip the whole kelp caves area. Yeah, so the difference is that the reason why I say it's the calm before the storm is because back before I did a lot of these things that I'm showing you now, I didn't do any of this stuff in GDQ. I wasn't ready for it yet. But a lot of very precise small tricks have been added that pretty much all happen after the Sea Needle 2 segment. So they all start pretty much right here with all the crazy cruise boosting strats that I do that were just added recently. That's why I call it the calm before the storm. For example, single jump spatula grab there is extremely difficult, but someone who doesn't run the game wouldn't be expected to know that, so I probably wouldn't explain that in a run. It's just like a very small optimization that makes the movement more fluent. See how I saved a lot of time there? It's because I didn't do it in my PB. That's another trick that I didn't do as well before like a month ago. Just another character cruise boost that's extremely difficult. It makes the game a little bit faster. A lot of small optimizations since I ran in the marathon. But there are also some pretty cool tricks that have been added as well, not just like the small cruise boosting stuff, like the RCB strats. Unfortunately in this category we still have Drain the Lake, which is kind of funny because we've been trying to get it out of the run for so long. But there is a theory now that we might be able to get it out due to a new skip found called Camper Skip. It's going to take some work, but it might be possible. In the early powers category that I'm submitting, we actually don't do Drain the Lake, which is pretty cool, because this is kind of a boring part in my opinion. Just another boss, like, I keep saying boss fight, just another fighting arena. I never talk about these things on my stream, like I never call it a fighting arena on my stream because it's like there isn't much to talk about. But I don't know, it's just, I created a habit in the time I've been streaming this run, and the time I've been recording this run, and I built the habit in the past hour. And now I can't get rid of it. So that's how you build a habit in a GDQ submission, guys. This is just very simple, basic platforming. Well, I mean, I make it look simple, and the people who run this game also make it look simple, but it's pretty difficult to do consistently and quickly as I do it, and other people do it. Another thing I didn't mention before is that if you grab the spatula on a specific angle, you will sometimes get camera locked, and then SpongeBob gets pushed forward toward the camera, but if you get it at the angle you're supposed to there, you'll start spinning so you don't fall off the ledge. So I'll go into that in more detail the next time I have to use it, which is actually in the Kelp Forest, and we exploit the camera in the Kelp Forest with cruise boosting power, and just to make that work and make it faster. So I'll explain it there as well. Here's another momentum acceleration exploit that we do there, bowling onto the slide like we did in Dream. And we can just skip this part of the slide here, get the sock. Just a little... It's funny, I used to do that when I was a little kid playing this game. And now we call it a skip, because we speedrun. I don't know. Funny how stuff like that works. This is the kind of game where there are so many glitches and exploits in it. You can play it as a kid and still find stuff. So a lot of these things I did, well, not a lot of them, but some of them I knew when I was a kid. Obviously not the more advanced stuff like disabling the hand, cruise boosting, but some things I knew about. Alright, so now we're going to the kelp forest. Yeah, like when I was a kid, I used to do the Goo Lagoon thing where you jump off the slide and go under the pier to skip the freezy fruit thing. And I would do the thing where you jump off the slide in Jellyfish Fields to get that. Just very small things that you wouldn't realize or you'd be using 10 years later when you're playing the game as a speedrun. Alright, so now we can just... This is pretty funny. Kelp Forest, we just abuse cruise boosting to skip to the end of the level. Boom. Normally you'd exit that gate when you finish the final challenge in this world, but we're just playing it backward now. Kelp Forest is jam-packed with like spatulas and I almost said shiny objects. I was like, which currency was I talking about? They all start with S, actually. They all start with S. Yeah, I almost said shiny objects. Alright, so now we're going to abuse the camera thing that I was talking about before. The camera's locked, so we're going to get pushed over to the door. And we can just enter the kelp caves. Kelp Forest is a lot more interesting in early powers than any percent. Because in early powers, we get campers and socks. Alright, that was a weird menuing flub.
Hey, kid.
Hey, kid. When I was doing this in GDQ, everybody laughed at that part, and I was like, I was confused, because I'm so used to seeing that, but it is kind of funny when he's like staring into the camera. Yeah. Alright. So you see the freezy fruit there? We're just going to skip another one of those challenges by using the cruise bubble to hit that button. Normally you have to go down there in the swamps and slam as Patrick to activate that and do this whole sliding thing with the freezy fruit. You freeze the swamp and you jump and get the spatula, but we're going to simplify it by just getting it as SpongeBob. Kelp Forest has a lot of downtime, actually, but I don't think it's... Maybe like the later part, like here. After you leave the kelp caves, or after you leave the kelp vines, maybe that's a good time to talk about donations and downtime stuff. But at the beginning of Kelp Forest, there's a lot to explain. And here we are again, just playing the level backward. Alright, now, the part that everybody hates playing. Dream 2. This is where the movement starts to get pretty intense. So hang on. Alright, so we've cleared Squidward's dream by skipping a lot of notes and just using cruise boosting to blast through the entire level. And now we have the level that everybody actually... If you didn't hate this level, you hate this one if you run this game. Sandy's Dream. This is by far the biggest skip in the game. It skips so much gameplay, and it's so fast, but it's extremely inconsistent, and everybody hates doing it. The setup that we do for it now, oh, that's a bad cruise boost. I'm gonna redo it. Oh, I guess not. All right, just do it off of Larry. All right, sometimes that happens. Like I said, it's inconsistent.
Another one.
Alright, we got it. So, this is the Texas Sponge Glide, and this is the biggest run killer in 90%. You get all the way to the end of the game, you're 50 minutes in, and then you have to deal with this horrible trick. But once you get it, you just float all the way across this giant level. It's the largest level in the game, by far. It takes so long to load. And you just skip the whole thing by floating. And it just happens to be that when you activate a Sponge Glide in that wheel, You're at just the right height to land on the acorn, and it's just amazing how it works out like that. I think about that all the time, like, there's just a chance, like, what if the acorn were just a little bit taller? Then that skip wouldn't even exist. Just crazy to think that, like, things like that just work out in speedrunning sometimes. Okay, now we're on the final stretch. The Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. Or as I like to call it, the Graveyard of Runs. A lot of intense movement. A lot of fast gameplay. And it goes right into the end of the game. This is normally the part of the game where you have a smile on your face. Oh, excuse. Well, not when that happens. Because you know you got past Sandy's dream, and this doesn't mean that you have a chance to PB. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're going to PB, but it means that there's a chance. So now it's just about not choking if you're this far into the run. The reason why I fell there is because my cruise boost was really weak. You have different speeds you can get with cruise boost, and it depends on your angle, the platform, if you got the frames correctly. Depends on a lot of things. It's a very finicky trick, pretty hard to pull off. Consistently, that is. Again, we abuse the camera mechanics to push ourselves. And we're just gonna make our way through here. Again, I can't really explain all that's going on here. There's just so much being skipped, and it's almost like a different game. We're just skipping all of these gravestone puzzles and blowing right through the game. We're pretty much done, honestly. It's a very short category. Okay. Now we have some more cruise boosts. Another out of bounds exploit to grab the spatula, and we're gonna warp to it. It's the staple strategy when you get a spatula when you aren't supposed to get it. You just warp to it to skip a part of the level. Now that's another strat that was just recently added to the run. It's called manual cruise boosting. And instead of letting the cruise bubble burst onto the wall when you activate a cruise boost, instead you manually cancel it yourself because there's no wall to burst on. So that's an example of a manual cruise boost, and it's the only time it's used optimally in the 90% route right now. And now we have the Flying Dutchman's ship. And usually we just call it cannons, because that's kind of what we're doing. This is an AI manipulation strat right there to make sure Chuck doesn't hit us. Chuck, they call him Chuck because he always chucks missiles at you. He's really annoying. So we just call this cannons, this whole sequence here. This cruise boost is actually really slow. I gotta get rid of it. Now, this is the longest cutscene in the run. It's kind of funny, we don't skip it. There's no way of skipping it if the hand is disabled, so you just gotta sit through it. This is like, at this point in the run when you're going for a PB, you're thinking to yourself, okay, all I have to do is get Dutchman skip and the final boss fight skip, and that's it, man. We're home free. So that's just your time, your downtime to think about what you have to do if you're gonna make it. And now we have Dutchman skip. Similar to prawn skip, we're just gonna hit an invisible trigger. And in doing that, we're gonna end the boss fight. So just watch as we get the movement to get up to the point where we can touch the trigger. Just gonna climb for a bit. Had enough? At this point, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I think I'm gonna PB. If you're on pace, not if you're plus 130. So now we can exchange our final socks to Patrick, and we have the magic number 75. And we can head on back to the chum bucket.
They serve food here, yes, but they don't serve love.
now we have the final boss fight.
And here we are, folks, the main event. A gauntlet of ever-increasing ferocity.
Let's set it up and finish him off.
Better change tactics and fast.
Now it's funny how every robot, like I said, every robot has its weak point, right? And that robot's weak points are all on its body, and you'd think, oh, we're gonna go through and hit all of its weak spots to beat it. Well, instead, we get him to launch us up with the platform launching mechanics this game has, the very wonky physics, to launch us up and hit the trigger that ends the boss fight. And that's it. And what we just did there was a damage boost, and we can just skip the entire boss fight here as well. Just damage boost to the bottom of the level and jump on a trampoline, and now we're just finishing the game. And this is pretty much the end of the run. Time's coming up. Alright, not bad for explaining every little thing this game has to offer and every small trick. 10102, final time. Anyway, that's any percent. You've seen it. I thought it was a pretty big success for its time. Saw it the last time it was in GDQ. It's understandable if you guys think like, alright, the game's already been in. It's understandable if you don't want to have it 2 GDQs in a row, but I still think that it can be a pretty big hit if it comes back for a second try. And that's why, well, I'm offering this as an alternative if you guys did like it enough to have it again, which would be awesome. I'd love to play this category again. But at the same time, I think that Early Powers, the other category that I'm submitting, is a much better choice for a marathon because it gets rid of the boss fights and there isn't as much walking. But at the same time, there are no damage boosts in it. But again, it has its ups. They both have their ups and downs. It just comes down to what you guys want, really. I'm just trying to offer you guys 2 really awesome options, in my opinion. And if you liked my commentary the last time, if you liked the run, then, you know, I'm just putting it on the table. So I gotta at least, you know, gotta at least do that. Anyway, I gotta mention also that I'm very grateful to have been able to run this game in one of these marathons. It really meant a lot to me, so it'd be awesome to do it again. For round 2, it'd be pretty sick, gotta say. Anyway, that's my any percent submission. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna upload the Early Powers category sometime this week, so stay tuned for that. Alright guys, thanks for watching, thanks for considering my submission, and maybe I'll be seeing you again.